I normally have extreme reluctance to talk about Dvar Halacha to a very large crowd. The Gemara itself tells us, or the Mishnah tells us, that certain areas that are prone to be misunderstood should only be shared in small groups. So I'm really doing it because Rabbi Jacobs wanted me to talk about this. And first, let me just mention a few basic things, then I'll take a particular halachic issue just to give you an example of the methodology and some of the issues that come up. First, one has to understand that although Kiruv Rechokim is a tremendously important thing, according to the Rambam, when we bring another Jew to Judaism, we are actually fulfilling the mitzvah of Avas Hashem. Most understand that Kiruv is ben Adam l'chavero. I'm doing a person a chesed, v'yahavtu l'reacha kamocha. But the Rambam says it's not only the chesed I do for another person, it's an expression of Avas Hashem itself. Because if I love Hashem, I want Hashem to be served. I want to bring Hashem's children back to Him. I want to give nachas to the Ribbon Shalom. The Rambam says to be makarev people to kanfei Ashchina is Avas Hashem. And obviously, a person gets very emotionally involved. If one is committed to Kiruv Rechokim, one is very emotionally invested in trying to bring people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there is a Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara is simply that people sometimes think that the ends justify the means, and there's such a thing as, for Kiruv Rechokim, you can do anything, the so-called Kiruv Heter. So I guess the first basic point of wisdom that one needs to know is there is no such thing as a special Heter for Kiruv Rechokim, that one has to be Mekarev within the parameters of Halacha. Now yes, it is true that when there is a Machlokas HaPoskim, there are different views, some are stricter, some are more lenient. Certainly, Kiruv Rechokim can be a major factor in being machriya, that one would follow a more lenient approach within halacha instead of a stricter approach. But that just means that it's a factor that is machriya within a machlokas. It is not itself a factor that would permit a leniency that would otherwise not exist. One way of putting it would be that in Kiruv Rechokim, you go up to the cliff, but you don't go over the cliff. And that's very important. And therefore you have to know the Gevul, and this takes, number one, a lot of learning. So anyone that's Isaac in Kiruv has to continue to learn. But it also requires that one is makasher themselves to a posek that is knowledgeable. And part of it is because when you're emotionally involved, you become a nogeya b'davar. And when you become a Nogeya B'davar, even if you're a great Talmid Chacham in your own right, you will sometimes bend the rules a little bit in order to come to a certain result. In fact, not apropos of Kiruv, but to show you the Kayach of Negias, they say they tell a Maisa about the Shach. The Shach is one of the great Gedolei HaPoskim, that the Shach once had a Sichsuch and Dinei Mamonos against somebody. And the Shach went to a Beis Din, and the Shach presented his case, and one could imagine the type of case the Shach presented, with rayas from all Shas and Rishainim all over the place. And the Shach lost the case. So the Dayanim said to the Shach afterwards, when they announced the Psak, they said, you had given us such an argument that for sure, you convinced us. But then we came across a Sefer on Choshen Mishpat that was just published. And the Sefer on Choshen Mishpat slugged up all of your rayas, and it absolutely proved that the other side was right. That Sefer was the Shach's own chibur on Choshen Mishpat, the Shach's own writings. The Shach himself slugged up all of the rayas that he brought. But when it was Nogeya B'davar, so the Shach himself saw the rayas totally differently. In Kiruv Rechokim, it's a real nisayon. I think all of us know this, that we're so anxious to be able to do good work, to be able to do important work, to try to do something that has the best chance of being makarev somebody. And therefore, as a result, even if we wouldn't openly break halacha, we'll sometimes interpret things a certain way. So that is why it is very important that one has a deya mibachutz, an objective deya mibachutz, someone who is both a Talmid Chacham, but someone who is not directly involved in the situation, so that true das Torah can be brought out. And we know that even in terms of Kiruv itself, even in terms of your goals, we know you're bringing people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Chaisamai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes. Hashem's seal is emes. You can't bring someone to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by breaking HaKadosh Baruch Hu's laws. You can't bring someone to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by misrepresenting Torah, because it's pumpa keret. You might be accomplishing something that looks like kiruv to Hashem, but how can it be kiruv to Hashem if it's a sheker? How can it be kiruv to Hashem if it's keneged the ratzon habeirei, as is defined in halacha? We know, although this is a big machlekes, but the Marshal, there's a famous Marshal. Now again, Rav Moshe Tainis, we perhaps don't paskin like the Marshal, but at least as a raya, it's an important Marshal. You know, when Tisha B'Av is coming, we're going to read the Gemara in Gittin about the story of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. And if you remember, in the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, when Bar Kamsa was embarrassed and humiliated, he wanted to be Makalkel, his own people, the Jewish people. So he told the emperor or the governor to send a behema to the Mikdash, and Bar Kamsa was matal mum. He put a blemish in the animal, and then he would use it as an excuse that the Jews don't respect the emperor and they're not makriv korbanos. So the Chachamim realized if they wouldn't be makriv this animal, theoretically all of Klal Yisrael would be in danger. So they wanted to be makriv it because the issue of being makriv a bal mum is not one of the Gimel Chamurais, and you could do it b'makam pikuach nefesh. But Rav Zechariah ben Avkila said, no, we can't do it, because people will infer from what we're doing that Balei Mumin are permitted to be Nikra Val Gabayim Mizbeach. And because of this, the Chachamim were not makriv it. And then they said, well, let's kill the Shaliach, because he's a Rodef, he's going to inform on us. He says, no, can't do that either, because people will say a Matzil Mum gets Misa, when that's not the case. Now, Aliba the Emes, it seems the Chachamim listened. Although Rav Yochanan said it was the Zechariah ben Avkila was responsible for the Churban, that doesn't mean he was wrong, the Marshal says, because they listened to him. So Frek the Marshal Lakasha, what's going on? Pikuach Nefesh says you could be makriv an animal with a mum. Pikuach Nefesh says you can kill a rodef. So what is this idea? The fear of what people will say is more powerful than the Etzem Aveira itself? If the Etzem Aveira can be done b'makam pikuach nefesh, so what are we afraid of what people will say? So the famous Marshal, the Amshel Shlomo, says that even though you could transgress virtually any Aveira b'makam pikuach nefesh, but if you're going to be mezayef the Torah, if you're going to communicate to people a falsity of halacha itself, and that was his fear. If people would know we're killing the guy because he's a Raidef, that's fine. If people will know we're makriv the animal because it's pikuach nefesh, that's fine. But if people are going to get the impression that the etzem halacha is different, even though that wasn't our kavana, that is what is called a ziyuf hatayra. The Marshal says, for a ziyuf hatayra, now again, I know Rav Moshe Zechariah, we don't paskin like that necessarily. So, but be it as it may, as an Indian of hashkafa and kiruv v'chaykim, it's vaday a very, very true idea that you're not mezayef. And again, it reminds us of the other Gemara, that when the Kohanim were on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash as it was burning, they threw the keys of the Beis HaMikdash back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they said, if we are not able to be the Gizbarim, if we cannot be the custodians of your bias, you take it. And the Gemara tells us a hand came from heaven and took the keys. But that's the same thing. If a Yid feels, if a Makara feels, if a Rav feels, the Torah, the halacha is too strict, I can't be Makara people if I have to follow all the halachas. Well, the answer is, then give the keys back to the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom made the rules. The Rebbeinu Shalom made the Torah. If he set down the rules, and if you think it doesn't work, of course you're probably wrong, but if you think it doesn't work, it becomes HaKadosh Baruch Hu's achrayas. It's not my achrayas to try to bring people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in ways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself ruled out. There is a word from the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav brought an interesting raya. It's a little bit of a technical raya. That even if by not giving into, not bending the halacha, we would delay the coming of Mashiach, even for a very long time. It says, even for Bias HaMashiach, one cannot violate a Kutzo Shel Yud. And the Brisker Rav's raya is this. The Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses, somebody asked, where's Eliyahu Hanavi these days? Where does he hang out? So at the time the question was asked, he says, he hangs out in the city of Rome, and he's with the Mitzrayim, people who are Shrek L'Chasik, and he's changing their bandages, he's metapel with them, he's taking care of them. And the Gemara describes when he removes bandages and replaces, he does one person at a time, meaning to say he takes off the bandage, puts on a new bandage, then does it to another person. He doesn't take off two bandages at a time, two people, and then do it. Why is that? So Eliyahu Navi explains, because the problem is this. Mashiach can come any second. It could be a Zman of Gula any second. And there are certain Zmanim that are Mesugel for Gula, and if I don't respond exactly then, it's going to be too late, and it may be years or decades. So Memela, I don't want to be in a position where I have two people I have to take care of, because if Mashiach comes in the middle, I'm going to miss the opportunity. By the way, you see that he's going to miss the opportunity because he's going to be metapel with the chaylim. There you see Taka, he would be metapel with the chaylim. Therefore, I only do it one at a time. So when Mashiach comes, I only have one bandage to replace, and I can do it. So you see, in other words, you see from that Gemara, that's the first half of the Gemara, that Mashiach has a certain zman, and when you're madche, when you miss the moment, there may be a very, very long wait. And yet, the Gemara in Eruvin says that Mashiach cannot come on Shabbos, and the reason is that if you hold that there's an Isser of Techum, going Chutz L'Tchum, if you're above 10 Tvachim, that's a machlokes, so Mashiach cannot come because he would be violating the Techum even though he's coming from the sky. Now l'chayra, the Brisker Rav says, but if the pshat is, there's a certain Zaman Mashiach has to come based on the Zechuyas of Klal Yisrael, that when we're ready, it has to come, because a second later, the balance of Zechuyas could change. Then how could Mashiach not come if it's necessary to come? So you see, Taka, the Brisker Rav says, that the Mashiach is not going to violate the Chum, even if that means that the Geula is going to be delayed until a later moment when Klal Yisrael has all of those Zechuyas. So Hagam, that the Chumin is Drabanan, like many Shitas. That's not even an Isser D'Oraisa. The Brisker Rav says that for Hatzalas Klal Yisrael, you don't violate the Inyanim of Halacha, Kal V'chaimer for the Hatzal of Yechidim, as important as it is to bring them to Torah. So this is an important thing. Again, it's pashut, but it's worthwhile to remember that basically the maftechas of Torah and Kedusha were given, they belong to Hashem, they were given to us as custodians, and we don't have rishus to be mezalzel with them. We have to do them the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do them. And if we think it doesn't work, then we can throw back the keys to the Rebbeinu Shalom and say, you be Makarev Am Yisrael, if we're not able to do it. And again, the Kuzari says, by the way, that by Nadav and Avihu, this is an old cheshbon, that Nadav and Avihu died because they brought Eish Zora, and Chazal have all sorts of interpretations. They didn't want to get married. They were Meira Halacha B'fnei Rabba. The Kuzari, so the question is, how does that fit with Eish Zora? The Torah says an Eish Zora. So the Kuzari says, metaphorically, that's what Eish Zora is. Eish is passion, enthusiasm. A person wants to become close to Hashem. But something is Zora when you want to become close to Hashem in a way other than what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. So none of them didn't want to get married. They thought they could be separated from Gashmias, etc. Meira Halacha means they didn't like the halachic system. They were looking for what we would call today, lahavdil, New Age spirituality. Even Shasu Yayin, the Kuzari says they wanted to elevate their emotional feelings to be able to connect to Hashem. Everything was L'Shem Shamayim. But it's called Zarus. It's called Zarus, because you can only become Dovuk to Hashem by following the Mahalchim of Hashem, and the ends do not justify the means. And the ends themselves are not going to be realized. Again, I don't want to be marich too much in this point, but if you look at the Nefesh HaChaim was written in the generation when Hasidus started. We know that the Vilna Gaon was misnaged in a very, very strong way. The Nefesh HaChaim is a very gentle sefer. The whole tone of the machlokes was radically different, and that's a whole interesting discussion. That's the other class I give on the intellectual currents in Klal Yisrael. But if you look at the Nefesh HaChaim's Taina, and Nefesh does not mention Hasidus or anything by name, but the Nefesh HaChaim Tainas, that although Kavana and Devekus are very, very essential in Avodas Hashem, Kavana, Devekus, but the Kavana and the Devekus has to be mechuber to the diktuk of the halacha. That a kavana and a devekus that is menutak from the halachas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ultimately going to lead you to a false end, and it'll lead to a richuk from Hashem and not a kiruv to Hashem. That's why he was makbid on Zamanei Tefillah, all of these different inyanim. He gives a mashal there in the Nefesh Chaim. He gives a mashal about, let's just say somebody wants to make a seder, but, not during Pesach, whatever. They're too tired during Pesach. So they say, isn't the Yikr of Yetzias Mitzrayim to feel that Hashem took me out of Avdus Techeres, to have Hakaras HaTov, to feel the Gadlus HaBayrei? I could do that better, a week after Pesach. Wouldn't make sense. By the way, I once told this story over to a group of people who were not so religious, and a woman actually said, we actually did that. We couldn't get the family together for Pesach. We made the Seder a week later. It was wonderful. Okay, life imitates art, so to speak, but this is exactly what Rav Chaim Volozhiner was talking about. So I do want to emphasize, therefore, that number one, there are many reasons why somebody that's in Kiruv Rechakim should keep on learning. There are a million reasons, besides the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. But also, one of the reasons is that you're going to be confronted with shilas, and I'll mention some of them, day after day after day. If you don't learn, how are you going to be able to direct? But besides your own learning, as important as it is, one does need a disinterested koach haTorah, disinterested posek. Now, disinterested does not mean uninterested. Disinterested means objective, in case people don't know the English word. But okay, a disinterested posek that will be able to look at things objectively and weigh the pros and the cons, and will give you guidance, because negias is a very, very strong factor here. Now, let me just say, though, that it is also important that it be a posek that is very familiar with the facts of your seviva and on your ground. Pirkei Avos tells us, Al tadin es chavercha ad shetagia limkoma. Don't judge a person till you're in his situation, till you're in his place. And as the Sfas Emes says, that's almost impossible. You'll never be exactly in his makam. I don't want to give you any categorical rule that a posek in Eretz Yisrael should not paskin in America or vice versa. I don't want to say that, although I'm a little inclined to that. But it does mean it has to be someone that knows the situation. Frankly, kihilas have different pressures. There are going to be different circumstances. There may be situations that, although it is true that I said a while ago that there's no automatic kiruv heter, but a shas hadchak can certainly be machriya in a machlokas haposkim. And to whether a situation is a shas hadchak or not sometimes depends on a very, very clear understanding of what a situation is. So it is important to find a posek who is both a Talmid Chacham, a sensitive person in Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, and a person who understands the psychological and emotional issues connected to Kiruv Rechokim, as well as someone who at least can be educated as to the facts of the community. I'll tell you that even when you go to Gedolei Olam Mamish, a person will go to Rav Yashiv Zatzal, Gadol Hador, Gaon Olam Mamish, he would often say, you have to ask somebody who is familiar with the individual matzah. That is actually the sign of an Adam Gadol, that an Adam Gadol understands that sometimes there is a mitzias stika issue that needs to be understood by somebody who is actually there. And that's al tadnis chavercha sheyam kaimai. And the Svarim tell us that this is the meaning of the phrase that a dayan must dan din emes liamita. Right? Chazal say, they have a lashon, a dayan that is dan din emes liamita has tremendous reward. Now, what is emes liamita? Truthfully truthful. What is the double lashon of emes liamita? So the Svarim tell us that there are two levels of emes in any psak. There is the emes of the Torah itself, that one looks at the makoros, one looks at the shitos, and one understands the halachic issue, and one comes to the hachra of the halacha. But then there's a second level of emes, in which you then have to apply the halacha to the mitzias of the situation. Now, the Vilna Gaon writes, this is the Gra. The Gra actually writes in Mishlei. The Gra writes, it is yitachein that a dayan is mechaven to the emes of the psak halacha, but the dayan may not understand the mitzias. And memela, the halacha as it applies to that mitzias is not going to be correct. So that's a special maila of emes liamitai that the dayan needs both to know the halacha and how to apply it to that given metzias. And that's a separate talent. And because of this, again, I certainly am not issuing. I'm not a barachi to issue a psak halacha. But I will say that the dynamics in America are sometimes different, particularly in smaller towns and college campuses. And some of what goes on, I'll pee the hara of poskim, would frankly shock many poskim in Eretz Yisrael. They wouldn't believe it happens. And one needs to know, therefore, who to go to. I don't mean shop around for kulas. I do not mean shop around for kulas. You go to a chashuv talmid chacham, but somebody who just knows the mitzias and is then able to be machriya, and then you're makabel, whether it's l'kula or l'chumra. You are makabel. A person has to be mavatal himself to the ratzon habayre, even if that means the effectiveness of your program, you feel, in the short run, might be compromised. So this is kind of some general perspectives on this. Now, just to give you a short thing before I go into a specific issue. Orla Gola gives a course. I give a course in what are called halachic issues in Kiruv L'Chaikim. And, it's the number of weeks varies. But just to give you an example, just give you a list of the types of issues that you're going to face, and this is going to be true whatever your career path is. This will certainly be true if you're going to be a Rav in a shul, if you're a campus Rav who runs a Kiruv organization. To some degree, it will even be true if you go into chinuch, because if you are teaching children, parents will come to you and hopefully look for you as some sort of authority as well. We have a whole bunch of issues of ishus, of marriage. Which women can marry kohanim? Do women today have a cheskes kashrus lekahuna? The laws of lashon hara as they apply to shiduchim. We discussed the famous tshuva of the native Yehuda. If a woman commits adultery, a woman's a saita, she's mazana, and she tells you, do you have to tell the husband? Is the husband mechuyev to separate? Are you allowed to tell the husband? Shouldn't you tell the husband? Again, I'm not going to have any answers to this because all of these are long things. If the wife doesn't tell, should you tell? Should you not tell? Standard psak halacha is not to tell, but okay, Native Yehuda said you do tell. The issue of transitional heterim and taras and mishpacha. How does that work? A couple's not religious. Number one, let's say they're not even married, and they don't want to get married. Are you miyayetz the woman to at least go to the mikveh? So the chala pachas, it shouldn't be nida, it should only be the yisra of penuya. Are you encouraging sin by doing that? Or are you matzil them from a bigger chait, the chait of nida? Right? What do you do? If they are married, and they're not ready to keep the 12 days a month or longer. So is there an eitzah to be miyayetz them to keep the 7 days d'oraisa, which don't require zayin nikim? Right? All of these are inyanim that are very, very serious inyanim. On one hand, you're trying to be matzil people from chatoim. On the other hand, you're giving them an eitzah to be over the ferish halachas. Is it better to be shevi al tasa, what they're doing is what they're doing, is it better to be matzil? Again, these are the types of issues. Seder Kedushin for a non-observant couple. Are you allowed to be Mesader Kedushin if you know ahead of time that a couple is not going to keep Taras and Mishpacha? And then, at the aside, you'll be dealing with issues of Mamzeris. Now again, this would not be for you to paskin. This would have to go to Gedayle Meirei Hayra. But as you know, it's a commonplace in rising divorces that many children, many kids, many men or women are children of second marriages when the first marriage didn't have a get. And there's at least a chashash that somebody who's now a Baal Tshuva might have the stigma of a mamzer. And as you know, Rav Moshe's mahalach was that we looked at the first marriage, and if the first marriage didn't have kosher edim, so mamela you didn't need a get. And that is the mahalach that has been matzil, literally, probably hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds of people of mamzeris. But the emes is that psak itself was not universally makubal. Rav Henkin, for example, held that even if a marriage ceremony was puzzle, if they were living together k'ish v'yishtay, and Orthodox people knew about it, that made it a marriage. Rabbi Yosef had paskin l'chatchila, a get should be obtained. Okay, so these are diyunim. Every case one has to go over. And then, of course, you might be dealing with aguna issues. That's not so much a kiruv issue, but mela, people, when people approach you about personal problems in their lives, you can't say, well, I only do Kiruv V'chokim stuff. Once you get involved in people's lives, there are going to be issues about helping a woman get a get from a husband who refuses to give a get. Right? So that's kind of issues of marriage that are very big. Issues of family planning, abortion, birth control. These are going to come up. Again, they're not kiruv issues, but remember, if you're dealing with people who come from a lifestyle in which all of these things are there as a matter of course, and you have to help them transition to das Torah, to following the halacha, you have to at least be aware of what halacha allows, what it doesn't allow. A third topic, our relationship to Gerim, Goyim, and Mechalelei Shabbos. Teaching Goyim Torah. Are you allowed to teach Goyim Torah? What types of things? What is the status of a Mechalel Shabbos? If he touches wine, can he be counted for a minyan? Can he be called for an aliyah? Can he get kibudim and shul? Can he get a bracha under the chuppah? This idea, Tinok Shenishba, as you know, the Binyan Sion in the 19th century, at the beginning of the Reform movement, did articulate an idea that many Mechalelei Shabbos who were not given the right chinuch may have the status of a Tinok Shenishba. But you may also know that in Eretz Yisrael, for wine at least, many poskim refuse to accept that characterization. Right? So these are issues that you have to know. Is wine going to be different than counting for a minyan or a bracha or whatever it is? Right? What is the status of all of these inyanim? Okay. And then the proper environment of learning Torah, when you're confronted with women that are not sanua, either married women not covering their hair, or women that are dressed much worse than that, are there halachas? Well, there are halachas. How do I daven? How do I say Torah? The Chazon Ish actually said, and if anything, this might be the one case where the Chazon Ish actually gave a kiruv heter. It's very fascinating. In spite of what I said, he said to teach Torah in front of women that are not mulubish b'tznius, the Chazon Ish actually mattered. He called that an eis lasesh Lashem. It's amazing that an acharon, only the Chazon Ish could say something like that. But lagabe that, he was willing to say eis lasesh Hashem hefer Torah secha. But once again, we can't do that on our own. And one would need a sheilas chacham on all of these different inyanim. So these are just a small sample of the types of things that go on. It's just an amazing diversity, and there'll be many, many more issues. There'll be issues of burial, cremation. Does a person sit shiva, for a parent that was cremated? Does a person sit shiva for their father that was a goy? Assuming they're Jewish from the mother, etc. Kaddish, all of these different inyanim, these will come up, meaning, as a general rule, when you're involved to bring somebody to Yiddishkeit, your job is not finished when you've gotten them to keep Shabbos and then you go on to the next person. Hopefully, they are a part of your life. You are a part of their life. They will look to you. Now, maybe they'll find in the years other Rabbeim, other Rabbanim, other sources, but hopefully you will continue to be a source. And as a result, you will be confronted with all of these issues. People talk a lot about the need for a second stage relationship in Kiruv V'chokim, because sometimes what happens in Jewish outreach is we're so interested in getting new bodies in. So once I got somebody from, I put him I put him on the bookshelf and forget about him. Oh, he's already from, let him be a regular Orthodox person. But people who didn't have the family connections and they don't have a whole circle of people continue to need guidance and hadracha. And hopefully, you will continue to be a person that will give them guidance and hadracha. So this is a complicated thing. In a way, it's easier to stay in kollel and not confront all of these issues. But the emes is, if the ultimate chashivas of Torah is liasuke shmaisa liba dehilchasa, then the ability to apply it to concrete situations is really the ultimate test of how we have internalized the Torah, how we have mastered the Torah. But again, I do emphasize that on one hand, you cannot be an amoritz about this. You need to be very, very well educated. On the other hand, you should try whenever possible not to be the final paisik in this, simply because you're a nogeya b'davar. I include myself, nogeya b'davar. Therefore, you need something outside and the like. And again, to go back for a moment, fertility technologies, now we have so much amazing things. Besides in vitro fertilization, we have egg donation, surrogacy. Now you can say, if somebody asks me, I would tell them not to do this stuff, but that's not how you're going to get the shiloh. You're going to get the shiloh was, hey, I have my sister, a woman might tell you, I have my sister or my mother carrying my fertilized egg because I had a hysterectomy, I don't have a womb. Well, that's great. The problem is, if your husband's zera is in your mother-in-law, in your mother's rechem, do we have a mamzer, Shaila here, right? So these are the yunim that one has to be very, very careful. So I would like to take, in the brief time that we have, just one little Shaila. And again, I do want to emphasize, I'm absolutely not giving you any halacha l'maisa whatsoever on this, but just to tell you what a few poskim have said about it. And that is the issue of making events, organizing events, extending invitations, whether it's to the klal or to yechidim, for Shabbos events that in all probability will result in people driving on Shabbos or otherwise being machal Shabbos. It could either be I invite you or I invite somebody and they're going to drive, or even if it's just a general event. And obviously, to tell any kiruv organization, well, the answer is don't do events on Shabbos. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, everybody's moda that the kedusha of Shabbos is moshech, it has a tremendous hashpah and the like, and yet, in many, many cases, we are setting people up for a form of chilul Shabbos. So what exactly would the issues be? So first of all, it's not even so clear how to characterize it, because we have two halachic concepts that are interrelated. There is, of course, a doraisa dikadin of lifnei iver leisite michshel, that you don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind man. And the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says that that is really an expression. What it really refers to is that I cannot give wine to a nazir. If a nazir wants to drink wine, I'm not allowed to be Maishik Yayin l'nazir. I'm not allowed to give even to a guy, at Ever min achai, to a guy. So Lifnei Iver even applies to be Machshel a guy in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. I cannot cause people to do an Aveira. Right? That's a lav of Lifnei Iver. That's a doraisa taka. Now the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah that the doraisa dika lav of Lifnei Iver is very limited. It only applies when the wine is on a different side of the river. Right? The nazir is on one side of the river, Trei Avri Dinahara, and the Jew is on the other side of the river, and the guy could not. The nazir could not get the wine without my assistance. So the Aveira would not have been committed without me. So if I am the only reason this Aveira could be done, that's called Lifnei Iver Leisitein Michshel. But if the wine and the Nazir and the other guy are all on the same side of the river, so even without me, the Nazir could take the wine. So even if I bring it to him, the Gemara says, Beferish, I am not Iver on Lifnei Iver Leisitein Michshel, because he could do the Aveira without me. We are Chad Avra Dinahara. So that's what the Gemara says. Question, therefore, am I permitted to give the Nazir the wine? Am I permitted to give the Nachri Ever min achai? Can I pass the ham sandwich if you could reach it anyway? So here we have a big machlekes rishonim. The Mordechai says, if there's no lifnei iver, it's mutter. I can give the person the ham sandwich. If there's no lifnei iver, it's mutter legamri. Breitowitz says that even if there's no lifnei iver da'oraisa, there is an isur d'Rabbanan to cause somebody to do an aveira, and that is called misayeya lidvar aveira. And Tosfos says misayeya is an isur d'Rabbanan. Okay, so if it's Trei Avra Dinahara, you have a Lifnei Iver D'Oraisa, and if it's Chad Avra Dinahara, like the Mordechai, it's Mutter. Tosfos says there's an issue to Rabbanan. The Ramah in Yare, there's a steer in the Ramah, but the Ramah in Arachayim paskins like Tosfos that it's an issue to Rabbanan, and this is generally how we paskin. Now, the interesting conceptual question is this. It's not so easy to characterize. I invite somebody to my house, and they're going to drive. Is that lifnei iver, or is it misayeya, or maybe it's neither? Now, you might say, well, it's not lifnei iver. I didn't give them the car. They had the car. They could have done this aveira without my invitation, but they wouldn't have done this aveira. Now, they may do other aveiras. I'll get to that. So the question is is the definition of Trey Avra Dinahara, they couldn't do the Aveira without me? Or is it they wouldn't do the Aveira without me? If you define it, they couldn't do the Aveira without me, then at worst, now it's still usher, at worst, my invitation is only an Isser D'Rabbanan of Misayeya, because I'm not enabling them to do the Aveira. They could drive to my house just to visit me anyway, or somewhere else. If, on the other hand, you define Trey Avri Dinahara as they wouldn't do the Aveira without me, then you might have to don that this specific ride is an Aveira they wouldn't have done. Now, it seems from the lesson of the Paiskim don't discuss, they don't phrase the question this way, but you often see that the Paiskim actually neman, that you're dealing with Misayeya, not Lifnei Ivra D'Oraisa. It's an interesting point. That's going to have some nafkaminas in the analysis. And apparently they go with the idea that since the guy has his own car, so you can never say he couldn't do the Aveira without me. So at most, I'm encouraging him by an invitation. So there are a few things to keep in mind. I want to mention 4 different svaras that are given by different poskim that would allow extending an invitation. Again, this is not halacha l'maisa, to somebody even if you know they're going to drive, provided, at least, you offer them an opportunity for accommodation and you're willing to live with it. And that means, by the way, that if you have like 300 people coming, you have to be able to put up 300 people. But now, heter number 1, which may not work in many cases of kiruv, is the following. The Shach in Yeridea and the Dogel Mervava, the Noda B'Yehuda, say a very important rule. They are mechalek between Lifnei Iver, which is a Doraisa, and Misayeya. And the Dogel Mervava is mechadesh, that even though Lifnei Iver prohibits me from causing any Jew or Goy to do an Aveira, when we're dealing with Misayeya, it does not apply to a Goy. So if a guy is on the same side of the river as Avram and Achai, I could give it to the guy. It does not apply to a mummer, a habitual violator. And the Noda B'Yehuda says it doesn't apply to any Jew who is over b'mezid. And the svara of that is the following. The Noda B'Yehuda reasons, again, the Noda B'Yehuda is enlarging on the Shach little. The Shach just said mummer, Noda B'Yehuda extends it to any mezid. He says that the Yisra of Misayeya is, since I am mechuyev to stop you from sinning, then how can I encourage you to sin? Right? It's a violation of my chiyuv to stop you. But I'm not mechuyev to stop somebody if he's not makabel teichacha. So memela, given the fact that most mezidin are not going to be makabel teichacha, so b'chiyai gavna, even though you can't commit a lifnei iver violation, the Noda B'Yehuda says you could commit in other words, Misayeya is not triggered in this case. So you get a very, very odd result according to this. So it turns out if you treat this as a Misayeya, and the guy who drives knows he's not supposed to drive on Shabbos, but he's going to do it anyway, you would be allowed to let him do it. On the other hand, in many cases of kiruv, bedafka, the people may not know. Another svara that from the Ksav Sefer. Now the Ksav Sefer was not talking about Shabbos. He was talking about a different thing. He was talking about being Mesader Kedushin for a couple that is not going to keep Taras HaMishpacha. And the Ksav Sefer says, assuming you're only dealing with Misayeya, you're giving them the framework where they could sin, the Ksav Sefer says, the Yisr of Misayeya is only if at the time you're giving them the assistance, they're doing the Aveira, like I give the Nazir the wine. But if I do something now that will enable them to sin later, that's not nichlal in the Yisr of Misayeya. So to be Mesader Kedushin now, because they'll have Bia later, is not Misayeya. Same thing with the invitation. I invite them on Thursday. The Aveira is done later. I'm not Misayeya at the time of the Aveira. A third lumdus is from the Marsham. The Marsham was a very, very great Paisek in Galicia. In the early part of the 20th century. The Marsham says that Misayeya is only when you are physically giving them the instrumentality of sin. You're giving them the wine. You're giving them the Avram and Achai. You're giving them the ham sandwich. Masha'en Kain, if I invite somebody and they take their own car, I was not moser the cheftza of the Aveira. The Marsham's tshuva was not about driving on Shabbos. The Marsham's tshuva was about renting an apartment. Actually, also a relevant shaila even in the non-kiruv area. Can I rent my apartment to people who will be doing Aveiros in the apartments? Whether it's Mishkav Zachor or just Snus or even Chilul Shabbos. And the Marsham says, even though you're giving them the apartment, now it's not Lifnei Iver because they can get an apartment somewhere else. But L'chara, you're Misayeya by giving them the place. But the answer is, you're not giving them the Cheftza of the Aveira. The Marsham said, now again, whether a Baal Nefesh should follow that, that's a shot. The Marsham himself says, you shouldn't rent your apartment out to people that are going to do very bad things. But in terms of Misayeya, it wouldn't be us. Okay, these are side points, but the Yikr I want to share with you is really the revolutionary approach of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which to some degree Or Sameach has followed over the years. In fact, it was first articulated in a letter sent to the Rosh Yeshiva, which was then suppressed for a number of years in the Torah world, but then it reemerged in the Minchas Shlomos, etc. And I don't want to go through all of the ins and outs of the letter, but essentially Rav Shlomo Zalman articulates the following chiddush. And again, I do want to repeat that none of this is halacha l'mais. I'm just telling you what he says in the Minchas Shlomo Chelek Aleph Siman Lamed Hey. And actually, he's not talking about, unlike the letter to Or Sameach, he's not talking about driving in Shabbos. He is talking about another halacha in Shulchan Aruch, which is very analogous, and that is giving food to somebody. The Shulchan Aruch says beferish, I am not allowed to give food to a person who is not going to do Netilas Yadayim or make a bracha rishona or a bracha achrona, because I'm either over on Lifnei Iver, if he wouldn't get the food otherwise, or at least Misayeya, and therefore I'm causing a sin to be committed. In fact, you might not even have the Marsham's heter, because I'm giving him the chayfetz that he's going to eat without a bracha. So the question becomes, or Shlomo Zalman was asked, I got this worker coming to fix my air conditioning. He's a chiloni, and he's schwitzing. And what? I'm not allowed to give him a drink of water, because he's not going to make a bracha. So if Shlomo Zalman says that you are mechuyev to give him food and drink, even if he's not going to make a bracha, because here is the aside. The Isser of Lifnei Iver is, the Torah says, don't be machshil another person. If the result of not giving him the food is he's going to have averos that are much worse, he's going to hate from Yidden, he's going to hate Torah, he's going to think that the path of Torah is that it's cruel and rude, so it turns out that by not giving him the food, you're going to be gairem, a greater avla than if you give him the food. So Rav Shlomo Zalman says, he uses this analogy. There's an isser of chayvel, right? You're not allowed to be chayvel somebody. But if a doctor amputates a finger so that the gangrene shouldn't spread and kill the patient, we're not going to look at the amputation as an act of chavala. It's a chavala in order to prevent a much greater chavala. Now, Rav Shlomo Zalman makes the following chiluk, which is a very important chiluk. I am not allowed to be over an aveira kala, to be matzil somebody else from an aveira chamura. He gives an example. You know, midrabanan, you're not allowed to be mafresh, trumas, and maestris and Shabbos. So let's say I have a guy who doesn't care, and he's going to eat tevel. So you might think, maybe it's kedai for me to be over the isser drabanan of being mafresh, trumos, and maestris, in order to be matzil him from the isser tevel, which, like some opinions at least, might be an isser d'oraisa, although most opinions say not. But let's say tevel would be d'oraisa. Rav Shlomo Zalman says no. Ein ayrim liyadam chatei b'shvil sheyiskei chavercha. You cannot be over even a small avera to prevent somebody else from being over a big avera. But legabe lifnei iver, it's a different calculation. I am allowed to cause somebody else to be over a smaller avera if that will be matzel them from a bigger avera, because even though in some sense it's lifnei iver misiyeya, no, it's considered to be a takala, a menias takala. In other words, the yisr of lifnei iver is not to be machshel. Here the hachshala goes the other way. Based on this, and Rav Shlomo Zalman wrote in another letter to the same effect, if you can judge. And this is, I think, where you especially need the input of an objective das Torah. That it would be tachem. That if you don't invite the person for Shabbos, what is he going to do? He's not going to stay at home. I mean, let's say you were to tell the person, I'm sorry, you can't drive on Shabbos. Now, if what's going to happen is the guy's a firm person, the guy will stay at home, the guy will daven b'yechidus, then eino chinami. Then it's kedai to tell him, don't come. But if it's somebody who anyway is going to be mechal Shabbos, and the chilul Shabbos is likely to be much more than the particular chilul Shabbos of driving, it may be, maybe a million things. It may be driving other places, going to the beach, going to the movies. There'll be no Sudas Shabbos, there'll be no Kiddush, there'll be no Birchas Hamazon. And that's even in the short term. And in the long term, there's a potential of Kiruv Rechaikim. Again, I'm not giving a halacha l'maisa, but according to Rav Shlomo Zalman's cheshbon, it would be kedai to be machshil, so to speak, somebody in one avera, in order to prevent greater averas in the future. He brings a raya to this svara from Rabbi Kiva Eger, Hagai's Rabbi Kiva Eger. Rabbi Kiva Eger has an odd case. We know that when a man cuts off his payas or shaves the beard with a razor, he's actually over on two lavin, because there's a lav to be a makif, there's a lav to cut it off, and there's a lav to be a nikaf. So if I do it to myself, I'm over on makif and nikaf. Now a woman does not have the yisr to be she doesn't have the yisr of nikaf, and therefore she doesn't have the yisr of makif. So Rabbi Kiva Eger discusses the shaila: is a woman allowed to give a prohibited haircut to a man? So you might think, well, even though the woman is not overis anything, she can't give it to the man because she's causing the man to be over the avera of nikaf. So it's either lifnei iver or it's misayeya. Zakt Rabbi Kiva Eger the following svara: if the woman, again, I'm not dealing with the tznius issue, I would just assume putting that aside. Let's say it's a daughter, a mother, a wife. The issue would be this: if the man would do it without her. Now that negates lifnei iver for sure anyway. But here's Rabbi Kiva Eger's svara: the avera he would be committing would be worse. If he does it to himself, he is over on makif v'nikaf. If she does it to him, she's not overis on anything. He's only over on nikaf. Zakt Rabbi Kiva Eger, he's mesupik. Rabbi Kiva doesn't say for sure, but he says yesh svara loymar, that she is allowed to be gairim him to be over on nikaf in order to be matzal him from being over on makif the nikaf. Zakt Rav Shlomo Zalman, this could be a big mafteach in the law of misayeya, because misayeya was a relevant concept over there, that you could cause someone to do an avera kala. Of course, Chilul Shabbos is not a kala, but in order to prevent a greater takala, both by the bracha and even possibly by the driving of the car. Now, I just want to point out that the Chazon Ish, who does not address this issue, the Chazon Ish says in Hilchos Shavios, he says, we bedafka do not follow this lumdus. He only says it b'makam safek. The Chazon Ish says the following: the Mishnah in Shavios says that if a person is an Am Ha'aretz who's chashid to do avodah and shmita, you're not allowed to sell or rent him or lend him implements like a plow that can only be used for agricultural work, because you're gairim, it's misayeya. Basically, you're a misayeya in avera, even if you get them elsewhere. That's actually a raya that we paskin like Taisvus. There's an issue misayeya. Aber, the Mishnah says, if you give him kalim that can either be used for permissible activities or not permissible, even if it's more likely he'll use it for impermissible activities, you are permitted. Now, the Chazon Ish says, why? I mean, if there's an issue of misayeya, then at least it's a suffix misayeya. So the Chazon Ish says that he understands the Mishnah based on Rav Shlomo Zalman's cheshbon, but with a twist. If you wouldn't lend the Am Ha'aretz, he would come to be a hater of Torah. He would hate Torah and mitzvahs. And as a result, the averis he would commit would be much worse than violating Shemitah. That's why, when it's a safek, you take the chance. So what is the Chazon Ish saying? We go with Rav Shlomo Zalman's svara, when it's a suffix if he'll do the Aveira, but we don't matter it when it's a Vada, he'll do the Aveira. It's interesting. So the Chazon Ish does not quote Rabbi Akiva Eiger, but it's interesting that the Chazon Ish goes with the Mahalech, but only b'makam suffix, not b'makam Vada. Be it as it may, how you paskin, I have to leave up to your Pasek and your Moreh Hara. Let me just say that Rav Moshe Sternbach does have a beferish tshuva, specifically about inviting people who will drive on Shabbos, and he absolutely does matter it if it could lead to a kiruv rechaikim, even though you never know for sure. So Rav Moshe Sternbach does matter it. On the other hand, Rav Vajner answers it. And I can't end without mentioning Rav Moshe Feinstein, of course. Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was considered to be the Pesach in America. Interestingly enough, Rav Moshe, in an old tshuva, more than 40 years ago, actually 50 years ago already, actually did answer it, but he had a very creative, a new chiddush. Rav Moshe has a tremendous chiddush that no one else agrees with. We've been analyzing this, Lifnei Iver, Misayeya. Rav Moshe says, Lifnei Iver and Misayeya is when the Nazir on his own wants to drink the wine and you give it to him. Lifnei Iver, Misayeya. But when you create the circumstance which gives him the desire, Rav Moshe's Mechadesh, it's a whole new category called Mesis of all things. A Mesis is an enticer, the Avodah Zarah. We know that a Mesis is Chayav Misa. Now the pashtus of Mesis is, a Mesis is only for Avodah Zarah, but Rav Moshe's Mechadesh, that even though the Chayav Misa is only for Avodah Zarah, the Yisr of Mesis applies to all Averas. He brings a raya. People think on the raya. The raya is, because the Gemara says the first Mesis was the Nachash. Right? What's the raya that we don't show Rachamim to a Mesis? Because the Nachash told Chava to eat from the tree. Ein tayin lamesis. I frekt Rav Moshe, eating from the Eitz Hadas isn't Avodah Zarah. Okay, you can talk about that. So vice techais, any Avera has a din of a mesis. Now, so what is Rav Moshe telling me? If you want to drink the wine, you want the ham sandwich, and I pass it to you, that's Lifnei Iver, that's Misayeya. But if I say to you, would you like a ham sandwich? Zok Rav Moshe, that's not Lifnei Iver. That's Mesis. So Rav Moshe says, when you set up a program that is inviting people to be Machal Shabbos, forget about Misayeya. Rav Moshe says it's Mesis. Rav Moshe says about it's Asr. Again, none of us could be Machriya here, Ben Aharim Hagadolim, but just be aware that Rav Moshe has a very, very strict shita on these programs. Rav Shlomo Zalman's has an atiyah to be Mekel, and of course Rav Sternbach is explicitly Mekel on these inyanim, but all of the poskim do give you a getter that it has to be that you do offer them accommodations, and they also mention another prat, that if you're inviting people, it's better to invite them for Friday night than for Shabbos day, because when you invite them Friday night, you're creating the situation where they could come before Shabbos, and once they're there, you could pocket the keys would be muktzah, but you could find some way to take away the keys and have them stay. On the other hand, when you specifically target your invitation for Shabbos day, that creates almost inevitability that there'll be Machal Shabbos. One other thing that's interesting is that is there a chiluk, and I'll just stop here, is there a chiluk between what you might call an organized kiruv program, a Shabbaton with speakers, with shiurim, and simply a social event, like come to my house for Shabbos, or a bar mitzvah, or something like that? Logically, some have written that this is only a heter, again, it's a shtickle kiruv heter, but based on this lumdus, that it's only when there's a long-term prospect that you're doing something that can make somebody a Shomer Shabbos, not if it's just a hit and miss, sporadic social event. On the other hand, I have to say that it could be based on Rav Shlomo Zalman's lumdus. It might be that even a casual invitation would suffice, because here's the getter. If you don't invite him, there's going to be like 24 hours of Chilul Shabbos. If you do invite him, there's only going to be 18 hours of Chilul Shabbos plus the drive. So it might be, if you took Rav Shlomo Zalman to the furthest extreme, now I'm not saying you should or you could, but it might be based on his lumdus. The heter does not even depend on the long-term potential of kiruv. That Shabbos gufa might be considered to be a hatzalah from a bigger michshel. Yesh la'ayin, I have not seen any poskim have been willing to go that far, and I am certainly not taking the achrayas. But once you go with that cheshbon, there are many, many possibilities. Again, I just hope this illustrates that these are complicated questions. They would depend very much on the facts of every matzav, and I just repeat once again that one needs to both continue to learn the halachas and have a paisek that one can talk to. So, much hatzlacha.